The world never ends with a roar. It ends with a whisper, a cough in the night, a hand trembling against a fevered cheek, a silence in the streets where laughter once lived. In Stephen King's The Stand, it begins with a disease that spreads faster than fear, faster than fire. But the plague is only the stage. The real story begins afterward, when the bodies are gone, and the survivors are left staring at one another, stripped of illusions. What do you cling to when there are no rules left? No governments, no jobs to keep you moving forward? When survival is no longer about food or water, but about belonging? That hunger, the quiet, unspoken hunger to be part of something, to not be left alone in the ash, is the most dangerous need a human being carries into the end of the world. The truth is, we are not creatures built for isolation. Loneliness scratches away at the mind, pulls threads out of sanity until it unravels in your hands. People think the worst fear is death. It isn't. The worst fear is to die unnoticed, to die unloved, to walk through a crumbling world and know that not one person would remember your name, not one person would weep for your absence. That is why, in the ruins, people follow flags, shadows, preachers, and monsters, not because they believe in them, but because being part of something feels safer than standing in the silence alone, even if that something is evil. Even if it costs you your soul. In The Stand, survivors gravitate toward two poles: Mother Abagail, the frail, elderly woman who represents faith, and Randall Flagg, the dark man who represents power. But listen closer, neither of them, not really, are what the survivors are hungry for. They are symbols, yes, but the pull toward them isn't about morality. It is about belonging. In a fractured world, each broken human being aches for a place where their scars can be accepted, or at least hidden among others. That is the quiet hunger, the desperate need to say, I am not alone, even at the end. And yet, belonging has a cost, always. Sometimes it is obedience, sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is the blood of strangers. There is a criminal psychology to this hunger, how ordinary people commit unspeakable acts, not out of malice, but out of fear of exile. A person who kills because they want to survive is dangerous, yes, but a person who kills because they fear being cast out of the only community they have left, that person is unstoppable. That is the heart of every mob, every cult, every empire built on bones. When you strip away the excuses, it is never about ideology. It is about not wanting to be left outside in the cold. King understood this truth intimately. The horror in The Stand isn't just the virus or Flagg's supernatural cruelty. It is the sight of good people, neighbors, friends, co-workers, sliding into savagery because it feels safer to follow orders than to stand alone. Think about that. The apocalypse reveals not who we are in the light, but who we become in the crowd. Do you cheer when someone else is punished? Do you laugh when someone weaker stumbles? Do you kneel before a tyrant just to feel the warmth of belonging? That is the test. And it is a test that society gives us every day, not just in the end of the world, but in the everyday cruelty of survival in a modern age that isolates as much as it connects. There is a moment, sharp and clear, when you realize you are not free, when you bend your back, swallow your rage, nod your head just to stay inside the circle of warmth. You trade pieces of yourself away, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize you belong everywhere and nowhere at once. You are part of a group. Yes, but hollow inside. What do you do then? Do you rebel, or do you keep swallowing, keep nodding, keep smiling through the cracks in your soul? The hunger to belong is quiet, but it is merciless. It will devour your principles, your morals, even your love. That is why people cling to monsters. That is why, at the end of the world, someone like Flagg becomes not just a villain, but a savior, because he offers the simplest, most intoxicating gift of all, a place at the table. And here is the irony in the end. It is never the strong who survive. It is the ones who find belonging in compassion, in fragile alliances, in the shared humanity of their suffering. Mother Abagail's power was not miracles, not prophecy. It was the fact that she reminded people of their humanity, that belonging does not have to mean surrender, that to be part of something does not always mean to give away your soul. Yet even she demanded obedience, faith, sacrifice, because belonging always comes with chains, even when the chains are gilded with love. So you must ask yourself, what would you do when the world ends and the silence press against your skull? Would you follow the dark man, smiling as the fire burns behind him, just to feel the warmth of others pressed around you? Or would you stand in the quiet, trembling, waiting for someone to see you as you are, not as what you obey? The truth is, the end of the world is already here. Not in plague, not in fire, but in every moment we trade our conscience for a seat at someone else's table. The tragedy of belonging is that it never announces its price up front. It lures you with warmth, with a sense of family, with words that sound like safety. Then slowly, it begins to take one compromise here, one silence there. You tell yourself it's just survival, just a small sacrifice, just a necessary evil in exchange for community. But that is how corruption works. Not as a monster leaping out of the dark, but as a voice inside your head whispering, "Stay, bend, don't break the circle, don't be alone." In the stand, the survivors who gather under Randall Flagg's banner are not demons. They are not monsters. They are frightened people who believe that cruelty is the price of order, that violence is the toll for unity. When you study criminal psychology, you find that most atrocities are not committed by sadists. They are committed by ordinary individuals who are desperate not to be cast out, desperate not to be the one standing alone in the ruins. Fear of loneliness outweighs fear of guilt. Fear of exile outweighs fear of blood on their hands. The evil that blooms in such people is not dramatic. It is subtle, quiet, justified in the language of necessity. And that makes it all the more terrifying. Society itself, even before the apocalypse, thrives on this same bargain from childhood. We are trained to crave belonging, to fit in at school, to obey at work, to follow the rhythm of the crowd even when it grinds against our instincts. And yet, beneath the surface, every person knows how fragile that belonging really is. A single mistake, a single word out of place, and the crowd can turn on you. There is cruelty in that hunger, a cruelty in every whispered rumor, every mocking laugh at the expense of the weak, every shove meant to remind you that belonging is conditional. You are in until you're not. You are loved until you resist. You are safe until you question the rules. At the end of the world, these rules don't disappear. They sharpen. They become absolute. Because when society collapses, there are no distractions left. No jobs, no deadlines, no polite masks. All that's left is the raw truth of how far a person will go not to be alone. And that truth is ugly. You see it in the mob that gathers around executions, applauding death not because they want it, but because applause is proof they are still inside the circle. You see it in the neighbor who looks away from cruelty, not because they don't care, but because looking away is safer than standing against it. This is not science fiction. It is not even horror. It is the same mechanism that drives bullying, cults, political regimes. The end of the world is only the stage on which the same old play is performed with the masks ripped off. King shows us something devastating, that the hunger to belong can hollow out the self. That in the wrong hands, it turns love into obedience, loyalty into enslavement, and yet, he also shows us something else, something quieter, harder to see. He shows us that belonging can be redefined, that it does not always have to be about chains and fear. There is a kind of belonging born not out of obedience, but out of recognition, out of compassion, out of the broken pieces of humanity reaching for each other. Not because they are strong, not because they are powerful, but because they are fragile and they are afraid. Think of the fragile alliances that form around kindness in the stand. A hand extended to the sick. A voice that says, "You are not alone." A small act of forgiveness. These moments are not as loud as Flagg's cruelty, but they are the moments that keep the soul intact. Because the true antidote to the hunger for belonging is not isolation, nor blind obedience. It is the courage to belong to something that demands not your silence, but your humanity. Something that asks not for blood, but for honesty. Something that sees your fractures and says, "Stay. As you are, stay." But here lies the hardest question of all. How do you know when the price of belonging is too high? How do you know when the circle of warmth has become a cage? Most people never ask. They are too afraid of the cold outside, too afraid of the silence that follows exile. They would rather carry the weight of blood, the rot of guilt, than walk alone into the night. That is why the evil we fear is rarely born in darkness. It is born in circles of light, in communities that promise safety, in families that punish disobedience with exile, and it is why, at the end of the world, the most dangerous hunger is not for food, not for water, but for the approval of others. Ask yourself, in the quiet of your own heart, how many times have you stayed silent when you should have spoken? How many times have you laughed at cruelty just to belong? How many times have you given away pieces of yourself to stay inside the circle of warmth? Telling yourself it was just survival, just necessity, just the way things are. These are the questions that outlast the end of the world. These are the mistakes that echo louder than the collapse of nations. Because long after the plague has burned itself out, the hunger for belonging remains, and it will consume you if you do not face it. The hunger for belonging is not always a roaring beast. Most of the time, it is quiet. It creeps in softly, disguised as kindness, as protection, as tradition. You tell yourself you are safe because you have people beside you, because there is someone to tell you where to go and how to live. You mistake obedience for love, conformity for comfort, and slowly, without realizing it, you trade away the most fragile thing you own, your conscience. This is why The Stand strikes so deeply, even decades after it was written. The plague is a metaphor. Yes, but it is also a mirror. When the world is stripped bare, who do you become? Not when things are easy, not when you are applauded, but when silence and exile threaten to swallow you whole. That is when the true test of your character begins. Randall Flagg does not need to trick his followers with lies. He only needs to remind them of their loneliness. He only needs to offer them a place, a purpose, a role in something larger than themselves. Evil never arrives in the costume of evil. It arrives with open arms, saying, "You are one of us," and people join. Not because they are blind, not because they are cruel, but because they are terrified of walking alone into the night. This is the essence of criminal psychology at its most tragic. The majority of those who commit atrocities are not sociopaths, not bloodthirsty killers, but fragile souls who could not bear the weight of isolation. The mob gives them cover. The crowd washes away guilt. The voice of the leader replaces the voice of their own conscience, and soon, what they once thought unthinkable becomes routine. What once filled them with horror becomes normal. The line between survival and cruelty dissolves into a haze. But here is the paradox. Belonging does not have to corrupt. The same instinct that drives people into the arms of a tyrant can also drive them into the arms of compassion, in the ashes of civilization. When survivors gather around Mother Abagail, they are not obeying out of fear. They are choosing out of hope. They are not blind to their suffering, but they are willing to suffer together, to carry the weight as a community, rather than surrender their humanity for power. This is the fragile alternative, the one that is always harder, quieter, easier to miss. But it is there. And this is where the emotional struggle becomes unbearable. Belonging, in its purest form, is both salvation and destruction. It depends entirely on what you are willing to give up to feel it. That is the choice every character in The Stand faces, and it is the choice each of us faces every day. Apocalypse or not, at work, at school, in families, in politics, in relationships, the hunger to belong is the same, and so is the danger. You must constantly ask yourself, am I here because this place protects my humanity, or because it allows me to abandon it without shame? When King strips the world of its systems, what he leaves us with is a haunting truth. The apocalypse does not change human nature. It reveals it. The same quiet hunger that drives people to laugh at cruelty in a cafeteria, to whisper lies to stay in favor with the boss, to hide their true selves in exchange for applause. That hunger is the same hunger that drives people to kneel before Randall Flagg at the end of the world. The setting is larger, the stakes higher, but the mechanics are identical. And so, the real horror of The Stand is not the superflu. It is the recognition of ourselves in the followers of the dark man. The realization that under the right pressure, under the right fear, we too might nod when we should resist, laugh when we should protest, obey when we should walk away. That we too might trade conscience for comfort, freedom for belonging. That the quiet hunger in us is not something we escape simply because we live in a world that still turns, that still pretends to be whole. And so, I ask you, when the silence comes, and it always does, what will you choose? Will you surrender to the circle that promises warmth at the cost of your soul? Or will you stand trembling in the cold with only your conscience to keep you company? The cruelest part of this hunger is that it never feels like a choice. It feels like survival. That is why it is so dangerous, because it cloaks itself in necessity. You tell yourself you are only bowing your head to get through the day. You tell yourself you are only swallowing your words to keep the peace. You tell yourself that silence isn't surrender, that laughter at cruelty isn't complicity, that obedience isn't betrayal, but each time, something small inside you dies. Each time, the quiet hunger eats a little more of who you are, in the stand. King shows us people caught in that slow erosion. The followers of Flagg aren't suddenly monstrous, they are ordinary. They are terrified, they tell themselves, "This is the way to survive. This is the way to stay safe. This is what everyone else is doing." The tragedy is that they are not wrong. In the short term, obedience does keep them safe. Submission does buy them a place at the table. The danger lies in how quickly they learn to confuse that safety with belonging, and how willing they are to overlook the blood on their hands in exchange for another day without loneliness. Psychologically, this is the same mechanism that has driven every oppressive society in history. People crave safety in numbers. The weight of guilt is easier to bear when shared across a crowd. If everyone laughs, then your laughter feels harmless. If everyone obeys, then your obedience feels rational. But the mob is never harmless. The crowd is never rational. It is a machine, built to grind down the fragile voice inside you that whispers, "This is wrong." And when that voice is finally silenced, when you no longer recognize the difference between belonging and enslavement, you become exactly what you once feared, a hollow vessel, alive but emptied of self. Yet there is another truth the king refuses to let us forget. There are those who resist, not because they are braver, not because they are immune to fear, but because something inside them refuses to bend. These are the people who discover a different kind of belonging, one born not of obedience, but of shared humanity. They are the ones who choose the fragile, trembling solidarity of compassion over the brutal certainty of power. They are the ones who remember that belonging without conscience is not belonging at all. It is slavery. This is the emotional struggle that echoes through the stand, the battle between the two hungers inside us. The hunger to be safe and the hunger to be true. To feed one often means starving the other. And the quiet horror of life, whether in a plague-ravaged wasteland or in our ordinary world, is that most people choose safety. Most people starve their truth to keep their place in the circle. And so the world fills with obedience, silence, cruelty disguised as necessity, until someone, finally, has the courage to step outside. But stepping outside is not glorious. It is not triumphant. It is terrifying. It is walking into the cold, with only your conscience as a lantern. It is risking exile, ridicule, loneliness. It is standing in the ruins with no promise that anyone will follow you. And yet, this is the only path that keeps the soul alive, because in that cold, in that silence, there is something stronger than the mob's approval. There is the possibility of finding others who chose the same, the possibility of building a belonging that does not demand blood, the possibility of being loved not for your obedience, but for your defiance. So the question becomes, do you dare? Do you dare to stand at the end of the world or at the end of your own small world and say, no more? Do you dare to let go of the false belonging that corrodes you, in the hope of discovering a truer one that may never come? That is the choice King places before us. That is the mirror he holds to our faces. Because maybe the end of the world is not a plague, not a bomb, not a collapse. Maybe the end of the world is the day you stop hearing your own voice. Maybe the apocalypse begins the moment you surrender your soul to keep your seat at the table. And still, The hunger gnaws. You can silence it for a while. You can bury it under work, under ritual, under the comfort of a group that tells you what to think and who to hate. But the craving for belonging never dies. It is stitched into us. It is older than language, older than law. The child clings to the parent. The tribe gathers around the fire. The soldier fights not for country, but for the man at his side. We are built to need one another. The tragedy comes when that need is weaponized, when the fire we gather around is lit with the bodies of the innocent, when the belonging we crave becomes the chain around our necks. King writes the apocalypse not as an end, but as a stripping away of distractions. The stand lays us bare. The plague kills millions, but it is only the scalpel. What it cuts open is us. Without television, without governments, without the illusion of progress, we are left with the simplest of truths. Either you stand for something greater than fear, or you fall into the arms of the dark man. And most of us, if we are honest, would fall. Because the silence of being alone is unbearable. Because the cold of exile bites deeper than any knife. And this is where the criminal psychology of the mistake comes in. We like to believe that when people do evil, it is because they are wicked. That those who kneel before Flagg, who carry out his punishments, are born villains. But what if that isn't true? What if evil is not born of malice, but of the desperate mistake of choosing safety over conscience? What if the followers of the dark man are not monsters, but mirrors? How many times in your life have you looked away, stayed quiet, nodded along, just to stay inside the circle? How many times have you convinced yourself it wasn't your responsibility, that you had no choice, that survival demanded silence? Multiply that moment by 1,000, by the weight of an entire world collapsing, and you have the birth of every atrocity in history. But King does not leave us in despair, because just as there are those who bend, there are those who refuse, not because they are fearless, but because they cannot betray themselves. Think of the ones who walk toward Mother Abagail, not because she promises power, but because she whispers of mercy. Think of those who stand trembling in defiance, even when they know death is certain. Their hunger for belonging is no less than anyone else's, but they choose to feed it with compassion instead of cruelty. They choose to belong to one another through honesty, through suffering, through the fragile thread of shared humanity. And perhaps that is the lesson we are meant to carry from the ashes of the stand, that belonging is inevitable. But what we belong to is a choice. Do we belong to fear, or do we belong to hope? Do we belong to the mob, or do we belong to the fragile handful who resist it? Do we belong to the voice that tells us to stay silent, or to the conscience that demands we speak? Because the end of the world is not just a story, it is a mirror. Every day, in small ways, we live our own version of it. At work, in classrooms, in families, in friendships. The pressure to bend, to nod, to laugh when you want to scream is always there. The temptation to surrender to the mob is always waiting. And the question King asks us, the question that lingers after the book is closed, is this: when your world ends, whether by plague, by silence, or by fear, who will you choose to belong to? And maybe that is the cruelest revelation of all, that the end of the world doesn't need fire or plague to begin. It begins in living rooms and classrooms, in offices and empty streets, in the small betrayals we commit against ourselves each day. The apocalypse doesn't arrive with thunder, it arrives with compromise. with the quiet decision to go along, to look away, to laugh when you should have cried out. That's how the hunger feeds. Not with one grand moment of surrender, but with 1,000 tiny silences, each one cutting you away from yourself until you are nothing more than a shadow cast by the group you cling to. Randall Flagg's true weapon was never his power. It wasn't the dark magic or the violence. It was the promise, you will not be alone. That promise is irresistible. It echoes inside every human heart. Because the one thing we fear more than death is solitude. Think of the prisoners who will confess to crimes they did not commit, just to be returned to the comfort of the collective. Think of the child who joins in mocking another, not out of cruelty, but because the risk of becoming the next target is too terrifying. Think of yourself, remembering those moments when you chose silence over truth, not because you didn't know better, but because you didn't want to stand outside the circle. That is the end of the world. Not when bodies fall, but when conscience falls. And yet, there is another way. A path that does not erase the hunger, but transforms it. Because belonging can be born not from obedience, but from courage, from the recognition that you can stand trembling, broken, terrified, and still be human. That you can reach out not with the iron grip of power, but with the fragile touch of compassion. That you can choose to belong to those who refuse cruelty, who resist silence, who cling to their battered humanity even when it costs them everything. It is harder, always harder. The mob offers certainty. Compassion offers only doubt. The mob promises warmth. Compassion leaves you cold, at least for a while. But in that cold, you find something the mob can never give you, yourself, and perhaps, if you are lucky, others who chose the same. That is the fragile miracle King leaves us with, not that humanity survives the plague, but that pieces of our humanity survive within us, waiting for us to choose them. So I leave you with this question, one that lingers like ash in the lungs. When the silence comes, when the circle tightens, when the voice inside you whispers that the price is too high, will you listen? Or will you sell yourself once again for the comfort of belonging? Because the end of the world is not measured in bodies. It is measured in the number of people who stop hearing their own conscience. And the truest horror is this: maybe that end has already begun.